So good morning and good evening to everybody for joining today's call or today's presentation from Mr. Ma Jun on the topic of expert perspectives on supply chain decarbonization in China. I'm really excited about today's presentation and learning a little bit more and frankly just having the chance to speak with Director Ma on a lot of important work that he is doing and helping our members understand some of the work that he is doing. I'm Matt Margulies, Senior Vice President for China Operations for the U.S.-China Business Council based in Beijing. I just want to take a minute to kind of set the landscape a little bit and give a little bit of background on Director Ma and on the Institute of Public and Environmental Affairs. Ma Jun, of course, is a director at China's most dynamic environmental NGO, the Institute of Public and Environmental Affairs, IPE for short, which is committed to promoting transparency around pollution issues in China. Now, IPE has expanded its work to create the Green Choice Alliance, which is a coalition of Chinese NGO organizations that promote a global green supply chain by working with companies to concentrate on procurement and the environmental performance of their suppliers, most notably in China. Another major of information transparency work that they provide is the Pollution Information Transparency Index, which IPE created in collaboration with the Natural Resources Defense Council. That index is also called PITI, I guess, or PITI, if I'm saying that correctly, and is China's first index to evaluate environmental information transparency in 113 cities around the country, and really has become a productive channel to engage Chinese government officials on how to strengthen the country's open environmental information regulation. Now, just a brief note on Director Ma and his legend. In the 1990s, Director Ma became known as an investigative journalist working at the South China Morning Post from 1993 to 2000. There he began to specialize in articles on environmental subjects, and he eventually became the chief representative for SCMP.com in Beijing. He was eventually named one of the 100 most influential persons in the world by Time magazine in May 2006. And then Director Ma's 1999 book, China's Water Crisis, was groundbreaking and foundational as China's first major book on the subject of the country's environmental crisis. Now, for USCBC and our members, we began to interact with Director Ma, with IPE and his team late last year as we prepared our 50th anniversary work focused on sustainability and climate change. And we are privileged to meet with Director Ma, with Helen and the rest of his team. I would say over the course of about 15 years, and correct me if I'm wrong, IPE has evolved from almost a watchdog to an independent barometer of environmental progress across China to now a trusted partner of governments at the provincial and upwards and higher levels in China for environmental reporting. And so today, Director Ma will go through some of the databases and transparency and supply chain reporting work that they do. Perhaps of most relevance to this group, to our members, is IPE's renowned CITI and CATI, City and CATI databases, which track supply chain emissions in China and climate action commitments made by thousands of companies, including 1,000 global brands and their China operations, a number of which are already USCBC members. So with that, we will turn it over to Director Ma and his team for a presentation on the great work that they are doing, what they would like to achieve, and really how American companies or foreign companies can plug into some of their work to help bring some new transparency and help really try and decarbonize company supply chains in China. So with that, Director Ma, can I turn it over to you for any remarks and for your presentation?
Thank you, Matthew, for your kind introduction, and hello everyone, and such a pleasure. Good morning, good evening, such a pleasure to meet you all. Thank you for your attention. As Matthew mentioned, we have the privilege to receive Craig and Matthew and the USCBC delegation in our office, and had a very good discussion. And so today, I'm honored to be invited, and I want to share with you, obviously, the pressing challenges, but in the meantime, many opportunities, I think, that we can work together to green the supply chain. Yeah, as we all experienced, the extreme weather events occurred more frequently in recent years around the world. Last year, the heat wave hit many parts of the world, but also particularly in the Yangtze River Valley in China, and not just the extreme heat, but also the during the monsoon season, extreme droughts, actually affected some of the supply chain last year, in southwestern part of China. And this year, some of you may live in this part of the world. You probably experienced not just the heat wave in June, but also toward the end of July, the extreme rainfall and then flooding in the North China Plain, including part of Beijing, the heat wave, obviously, people link that in China, to the global warming, but much fewer people understand that actually the rising sea temperature may increase the evaporation and make typhoon and other tropical cyclones far more powerful. So China takes carbon peak and neutrality as a strategic decision, and we're happy to see so far nearly 150 countries and regions have committed to go carbon neutral, and obviously Sino-US collaboration is key to global climate governance. Having said, with all this commitment, unfortunately, we're not seeing sufficient actions taken. Climate, obviously, the conclusion is that there's no credible pathway to 1.5 degrees Celsius in place. So it's quite urgent for more efforts to be done. But we all know that first the pandemic, and then the turbulent energy market, and then the geopolitical tension make it very hard for the nations to come together to enhance their ambition. So more eyes, more and more attention have been paid to the major corporations. And to us, we suggest that we need to synergize climate mitigation and pollution control and sustainable growth. So we believe that China's clean air and clean water efforts provide some inspirations, and the background is that when our organization IPE got started 18 years ago, it was at that time China's experience air, water, and soil pollution in a very serious way. Hundreds of millions are being exposed to health hazards at that time. We trust that issues with such a magnitude and complexity cannot be addressed without extensive participation, but a prerequisite for that is access to information. So with that, we started, our first project is to develop a pollution map database. That's the first version of the Blue Map database that we're seeing today. As Matthew mentioned, we work together with NRGC to assess the performance of 120 cities. Because at the beginning, the transparency was very limited, and in China, it's very important to involve the government. So we decided to develop the PITI index to help share the best practice, of course, identify the bottlenecks. And we're very happy to see an historic progress made in China's environmental transparency. And today that allows us to track actually nearly 6,000 sources and compile a large number of corporate performance related data. 2014, China became the first in the world to achieve real-time disclosure of online monitoring data of many tens of thousands of major corporations. But it was on 30 official platforms. We compiled that into and integrate that into a Blue Map app. And people started using that to file micro reports against the polluters, and eventually the government agencies weighed in and motivate them to change behavior. So we're trying to compile all this data together and to make that almost like a environmental records clearinghouse. And first, of course, the violation records from the first year, 2,000 records, and today more than 2.8 million records. But not just the negative list, there are also positive lists being generated, and we also compile those data as well. And today we're trying to track the performance of more than 12 million corporations, and color code them based on an index, dynamic environmental performance assessment tool that we developed. And supply chain is one of the first applications that we pay attention to, because supply chain environmental management is highly important to this country, but it's also to the corporations that's very challenging. And through the process, we witness severe pollution. This is about the first IT industry investigation, and this one is about our investigative reports on the global textile industry. And in the dyeing center, concentrated in the populated coastal regions, and you can see how the rivers colored black, and literally they run black at that time. And we try to engage with the suppliers, but they kind of complain that if they treat the waste but not their neighbors, then they're going to lose their business. But luckily, one by one, those brands, including some of the leading American brands such as Gap, they led the efforts to compare their list with our list of violators, and identify the problem and motivate real change. In this one case, more than 10 million tons of textile wastewater have been treated up to the standards before discharge into the Qiantang River and Hangzhou Bay. So we then developed this index into a green supply chain, CITI index, the city index, from 2014 to last year. This year, we're going to celebrate the 10th-year anniversary of this CITI. So all of you, we welcome you to join our annual events that will be held in October. And CITI index started from trying to respond to the stakeholders' engagement and create transparency, and then compliance. It's all based on the starting point got to be base compliance, and then corrective actions, and then extend green supply chain practice to the upstream, more pollution intensive process, and then try to integrate the energy conservation and carbon emission control into this. And last point, but not least, to try to promote consumers to go green, to buy green. So CITI index aligned with local and international, our national and international standards, and try to align with SDGs. Last year, we have in our assessments, through our assessment, we identified the top 50 among the 650 brands, local and global brands. And the CITI master, Apple and Dell, CITI master, and then you can see, as you can see, many of the American brands, including Levi's, like New Balance, like Nike, Cisco, and VF, and all excel in this, have great performance in our assessments. And talking about in China, working collaboration with the government is very important. And this is one case that we can see that how the Ministry of Environment, MEE, Ministry of Environment, how they directly published our analysis, when one of the auto supplier claimed that the supply chain breakdown incident going to cause 300 billion yuan of losses to the industry. And obviously our record shows that the supplier penalized in this case have series of records and should be addressed by the tech auto brands a long time ago. So through this joint efforts between NGOs and government agencies, the supplier Schaeffler have made great efforts to try to tap into the data we compiled and started comparing their list and motivate their supply chain, not just to address their problems, but measure and reporting their emission and set targets. So now they became one of the top performers. And we're also a key member of the supply chain, the China Green Supply Chain Alliance, guided by the MIIT, the Ministry of Industry and Information Technology. And we're very honored to have our data being adopted, they're being put on the official platform to allow all the users and members and users to check the performance. Through all these years, leading brands, including many of some of the brands participated in today's discussion, have incorporated the data we compiled in our Blue Map database into their sourcing standards. In this page, we can see how a whole group of American IT brands, IT giants, and have been working on that, and they disclose that through their sustainability annual report. And textile brands, many of them from America, have done the same, and but not just America, but from Europe as well, and many other brands from many other industries have been. There are also top performers as well, not just multinationals, but our local Chinese brands like Lenovo, TCL, and they are also, and some of the leading suppliers to multinationals have also incorporate Blue Map into their sourcing standards, and some of the new energy and suppliers such as Longji and some of the leading real estate property companies like Vanke and Landsea, they all join the efforts. So through all this, through all your efforts, more than 20,000 suppliers have approached to engage with IPE, and many of them choose to make their make disclosure about what went wrong, how they try to fix the problem. But increasingly, they started also measuring and disclose their emission. But also some of them started set targets for emission reduction. So today it is a chance for me to say thank you all for all your support, particularly those who proactively participated in our Green Supply Chain Alliance and Green Supply Chain Initiative work. And so 2020, China have made a commitment to invest 100 billion yuan on carbon neutrality, and from 2017, green finance policy have been developed. So we are our data also being used by major financial institutions in China and abroad, particularly in China. Some of the largest banks, including state-owned banks, tapped into the Blue Map in their due diligence prior to the loan, but also in loan and after loan. So last 3 years, we helped them to run through 1 million, more than 1 million companies who want to borrow money. So all these joint efforts, this is part of the efforts for China to try to deal with our once very severe pollution problem. So the past 10 years, we have seen a significant progress made in China's emission reduction, and our air quality, water quality all being improved. From this chart, this slide, you can see how the PM 2.5 concentration got cut by 2/3 in Beijing, and but unfortunately, in the meantime, we're seeing global carbon dioxide concentrations continue to grow. So this means that we have a new mission, and this mission is to completely, to peak our carbon emission before 2030, and then completely neutralize the so far nearly 12 billion tons of carbon dioxide before 2060. And we believe that we can learn from our pollution control efforts. So we believe data are going to empower our climate actions as well. So we need to start from the climate data infrastructure. And so the Blue Map for Zero Carbon, we started putting that together from 2020, and started from global data gathering. And then in China, we need to drill it down further to regions and to sectors. So the regional data, the provincial data, and city level data, you can check that on our map. And we also tap into the data to develop provincial and city carbon peak and neutrality index, along with the Chinese Academy of Environmental Science, the leading MEE think tank. And on our map, you can check about the chart and results and rankings, and spider maps, spider charts, and also we put that on the chart so people can better understand where they are. So besides the regional accountability mechanism, we also trust that it's very important to develop a corporate accountability mechanism when it comes to climate action, because China, as the factory of the world, much of the wherein there's a lot of embedded carbon in our exports, and it further push up the proportion of our industrial emission. which is 68% almost. And so we developed a CATI index, as Matthew mentioned, the Corporate Climate Action Index. CATI started from policy and governance, and then measuring and disclosing the greenhouse gas emission from scope 1, 2, and extended to scope 3. And next step is to set targets in a scientific way, and then try to review, every year through annual disclosure to try to review the performance. And then the last part is about the climate action, which is the most important, how to decarbonize the supply chain to achieve the brand's commitment. So last year, our CATI index got upgraded, and so this is the top 50. Again, we're seeing many leading American brands. So we appreciate all your efforts made. And this CATI index, last year we used that to assess the performance, not only about 600 local and multinational brands. Through this we can see industry analysis, but we also use that to assess the performance of 1,000 listed companies. And this year we're going to further expand that to cover some 1,500 corporations. My colleague Shan, who is also joining today's meeting, she's leading the efforts on that. And China's state-owned assets commission have required the SOEs to embrace ESG. So we also bring them into our assessment as well. And all of this need to be based on further, expansion of disclosure. So we're helping the ministry to consolidate the mandatory disclosure requirements. And from this slide, you can see it's getting far more comprehensive than before. Not just ecological and environmental violations and feedback need to be disclosed, but also the carbon disclosure, also pollution generation, treatment, and discharge information all being required to be disclosed. And we started compiling all this newly disclosed corporate data, particularly those from the cap and trade market. So today, more than 4 billion tons have been compiled last year, and but still many of these orange dots are those with a lot of energy consumption, but still haven't really disclosed. Through our gap analysis, we found that cost, not just awareness and capacity, cost is also a problem. So we developed the third part is about use our capacity to develop digital solutions. So we digitized the emission accounting process along with our professional partners, and last year the brands have motivated suppliers to disclose some 62 million tons of carbon dioxide on our platform. And from this is one of the samples. And analysis can show that the carbon intensity is declining, but many of the suppliers still experience the growth of the total carbon volume. So the challenge is still very big. And in the meantime, so many multinationals and financial institutions have committed to net zero from Glasgow, Paris to Glasgow, but addressing the Scope 3 emissions going to be fundamental for these companies to realize credible climate change commitments. So with that, we are developing, the corporate accountability map to highlight not just all the commitment made, but also the progress. Trying to create the progress bar so that help people to visualize and better understand that. This includes not just brands, but suppliers and also some of the large state-owned enterprises like Ball Steel. And the postal bank and some of the large banks also tap into this to motivate their clients to measure their own Scope 3 carbon emission. And beside the corporate carbon emission, the product level life cycle assessment carbon footprint is also very important, increasingly important. And so we're working together with the Academy of Environmental Planning and to develop the emission factors database. And along with that, a product carbon footprint disclosure and catalog to help people access all this tens of thousands of products actually already measured and disclosed, and develop some small applications on our Blue Map app to help the consumers take a picture to identify the embedded carbon. And as the supplier, as the supply chain is being redistributed in the region, we're also being invited to get into some of the surrounding regions. We're more than happy to help to manage the process to mitigate the impact, potential impact. This slide shows some of our activities and invitations to be in this region, and we hope that our tools developed could also be helpful in the other part. And we're more than happy to see in Vietnam and in Cambodia, in Thai, and we're still seeing some of the brands working with the suppliers to motivate change. And last, I want to share with you our new initiative, the Zero Carbon Supply Chain Initiative. We call for the leading companies and industry associations to take the lead to join, to create, join the global race to zero and decarbonize the supply chain, so that to fulfill the whole commitment made from Paris to Glasgow. And with all of this measures that can be done in a solid way, including, of course, nature-based solutions. As stakeholders, we also hope to work with a whole group of our partners to create an enabling environment for zero carbon supply chain. This is some of the new efforts that we are going to launch. One of them is about energy transition map, and then a renewable energy map. This is the wind power map. This is the solar power map, and we can see it's very exciting that China's achieving its renewable energy commitment. And this is not just provide energy, clean energy, but also align that with SDGs in a beautiful way. And Chinese societies guided by the government to try to go green, through garbage sorting mechanism being developed in hundreds of cities. And we are working on a garbage sorting index and also a plastic packaging recycling program. And we can see from this some of the efforts made, but some of the gaps still have with some of the brands such as Starbucks, Burger King, and McDonald's. Last slide is about the biodiversity. China have devoted subject to 30% of its land territory to red line zones, and so we are helping to put them on a map and develop applications for the biodiversity conservation to be done in a digital way. This is what I want to share with you, and I again thank you for all your attention and support to our work. And if there's time, I'm open to your questions. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much, Director Ma. That was absolutely a tour de force into just such a tremendous plethora of options and databases and tools for companies to get a better grasp of how they can achieve and implement some of their ESG related goals, their emissions goals, and some of their sourcing standards.